so many very fascinating contradictions and themes that I observe in your life. I want to start with the education experience that you had in religion and philosophy, and then the life, career trajectory building a company, and propose that some might find that an interesting juxtaposition of philosophical, religious education applied directly into business. Do you find that interesting? Do you find that paradoxical? Do you find that symmetrical?
So I have to tell you a story. That's the best way to communicate it. So I guess I was about 19 or 20, and I was studying philosophy and religion at two universities in Texas, University of Texas in Austin, Trinity University in San Antonio. And I was on track to get a degree in philosophy, but in any degree, you have to take required courses. I had to take this required course to get the degree. I hated this course. I did not like the professor. I hated the books I was supposed to read. But, it's like I had this internal battle. You got to suck it up. If you want to get your degree, you got to discipline yourself. You got to force yourself to do this. Versus, I don't want to read these books. I don't like them. I don't find them interesting. So that battle went on for a couple of weeks. And then one night, I stood up and I basically threw the book on the ground. And so I'm not going to read this frigging book. And then the next day, I dropped that class, and that completely changed my life. From that point onward, I just took complete control of my own education. I never took another class that I didn't want to take. I've never read another book I didn't want to read. Do not give me
Wait,
book
not
to
any
read.
other book at all. Book that you don't want to read.
Only a book I don't want to read.
You've read books, just not books you don't want to read.
Exactly.
Okay, I just want to be clear.
Don't try to call in favors on that. But why that was important, Brad, is because soon after that, I got 120 hours of electives, only in courses I was interested in, and I never graduated. But from that point, I began to take control of my own life.
So what about your upbringing prior to that moment do you think led to that strength? Your mom, your family, a role model? What gave you that inner strength to embark on the unknown in such a definitive way?
I don't think there's ever, we tend to want to think linearly, that there's like one single cause. And our lives are far more complex than that. There's so many different things that influence who we are. So I don't think I can go back and say, this changed my life when I made this decision. I took control of my own life. I began to follow my own heart, found my own higher purpose in life, and started Whole Foods pretty soon after that.
Then one more. And was there something you learned about philosophy or religion that gave you that strength? I'm curious.
You know what I learned? Here's what I learned. I learned that life is very short. You don't know this. Most people don't know this when they're young. I got it at a very early age that I was going to die, and it wasn't going to last very long.
How'd you get it? How'd you get that truth?
Maybe through all the existential philosophers I was reading, but also just because I'm just kind of wired that way. I just got it, and it was like, what am I going to do with the time I have in my life? Life is too short to do anything except things that you really care about.
So let's go to 1978, which I think is the year you dropped out. Is that right?
That's the year I started Saferway. Dropped out a couple of years before then.
How important or what relationship did you have to money at that time? And what role did
I didn't have any money, so that was my main relationship with it.
And what was money part of your vision at the time? Taking control, did it involve freedom and money? Freedom irrelevant to money?
I was young, I was healthy, I didn't have a car. This time in Austin, Texas, where I was living, I literally worked 15 hours a week like a dishwasher or a busboy, and I had all the money I needed. I lived with a bunch of friends, moved into a vegetarian co-op, and I just didn't spend any money, so I didn't need any money, and I was healthy and free and young, and I look back on that time very nostalgically now.
And you say, if you had to calibrate your contentness, your consciousness, your happiness then in relationship to in the middle of the action at Whole Foods, was there any relative satisfaction then that you lost being in the midst of the capitalist race, or did you find a way to make those two sensibilities consistent?
I mean, you go through different stages in your life, and you don't realize that you make choices, you go through these one-way doors. You don't know you're going through a one-way door till later. And so, I mean, sure, I mean, you give up certain things. When you make choices in life, other possibilities are closed off for you. You never know. You don't get to do a controlled experiment. What if I'd done this instead? You don't know. You don't know. So all I know is I don't regret the choices I've made. They all were true to who I was, true to who I am today, and they helped make me who I am today. So I'm not sure that's the answer you're looking for, but
I'm looking for whatever the truth is.
It's a true answer for me.
I'm interested in life. And so when you began the journey of creating what would you call it? A food store, a market, an experience?
So if we continue on my biography slightly, so after I took control of my education, I moved into this vegetarian co-op. I wasn't a vegetarian, but I actually just thought I'd meet some super cool people in a vegetarian co-op, and I did. Met my girlfriend that I co-founded the company with. And I learned how to cook. I had my food consciousness awakened. I became the food buyer for the co-op. I learned how to cook. I learned about natural. I learned about organic. And I didn't know it, but I found the purpose of my life. You know, I was just on fire about it. I just couldn't get enough of it.
Could you articulate it back then? Were you able to articulate on day one the purpose of what you were doing?
The purpose of Whole Foods when it was started was to sell healthy food to people, earn a living, and have some fun.
And at what point did
we're still doing all those things, but it's gotten more complex.
I'd say so. And at what point did consciousness become a word that you incorporated into the purpose?
It's like, it's a gradual thing. I mean, you become more conscious, hopefully, as you move through life. And your own interpretation of yourself evolves, your own interpretation of your business evolves. There was no, like, one point. It's been a gradual process.
And what does it sound like within Whole Foods, within your culture that you've created? I say businesses are like societies. They are created, they rely on, I suppose, belief, but also they rely on incorporating the values of that and the culture of that society into all the participants. So what does it sound like or look like for consciousness or conscious capitalism to be part of the world within that you've built at Whole Foods?
So, well, conscious capitalism, we wrote a book on it, but basically it recognizes that we described or discussed 4 major tenets in the book. The first tenet is every business has the potential for a higher purpose beyond just making money.
Has the potential.
It has the potential. Every business has the potential for a higher purpose. And secondly, that all the stakeholders matter in a business, not just the investors. So customers, employees, suppliers, investors, communities, and the larger environment that we're part of, they all matter. We should manage the business so all are optimized through win-win-win-win strategies. Third, we need a different kind of leadership, one that's not ego-driven, that's primarily oriented towards service, servant leadership. And fourth, we need to create cultures that allow human beings to flourish. We separate out the workplace from having fun in the rest of our lives, and I think business should be inherently fulfilling for people. So those are the essence of it, and those were incipient in the very beginning of the company.
They were what?
They were there at the very beginning. They were not explicit yet. They were not made conscious yet, but they were there. They were implicit.
I think it's so interesting, the education. I read also about the generalist education that you believe in, learning lots of things, but rather than one thing deep. And you've incorporated so many elements. I come back to the philosophy and religion, but we don't have to go there. But what's an example of that 4th tenet about bringing the joy or the fun or the play that we experience outside of work, bringing it inside to work? How did you do that? What's an example within a big organization of you as CEO acting on a belief that 4th tenet's important? Well,
first, in order to understand this, you've got to go back. You know, it's why I'm trying to tie it into the little bit of the biography. If people see Whole Foods now, it's a big corporation, right? We're like going to do. We did $16 billion. We got 90,000 people working with the company. Now we're even bigger when we're merging with Amazon, right? So it's much bigger. Most people don't appreciate it. But when we started out, we were just a bunch of hippies It's a bunch of hippies selling food to other hippies. And that was the business. And it was inherently fun because hippies are having fun. That's what we did. And so it was there always at the beginning. Look, I didn't know how I was supposed to do it. I didn't go to business school. I didn't take all those courses I took. I didn't take any business courses. I had no idea what I was doing. But once I got into it, then I read hundreds of business books. I educated myself. I met interesting people. But the very philosophy of Whole Foods Market has kind of always been there. So there was no separation. There was no, now we're going to make this a good culture to be part of. It was like the golden rule. You treat people like you want to be treated yourself. You create a culture that allows the people that work there to be happy and flourish. It's just common sense.
I know, but when you go into a Whole Food, my experience is the lightness, just the energy of a person who's stacking produce at Whole Foods is a different energy than someone at a different.
We don't manage through fear at Whole Foods. We're not trying to intimidate people. We've released love. In most corporations, love is in the corporate closet, hidden away because it's seen as weak. Think about the metaphors business uses: war metaphors, sports metaphors, and Darwinian survival of the fittest metaphors. And that's how people structure how they think about business.
So give more metaphors.
There's no place for love.
Love metaphor. So what, marriage or?
Yeah, I like biological metaphors. I like relationship metaphors. I like love, marriage metaphors. I use them all the time, and the media is very cynical. They don't believe that's possible, but it is.
Do you see who do you admire right now? I was going to say who's on the playing field. There I go with a sports metaphor. Who do you admire who's an active CEO who you think is leaning into consciousness and some of these more self-fulfilling philosophical or cultural principles?
Well, there are a lot of people I admire. I think it'd be smart for me. I think I'll say Jeff Bezos. I think that's true. I do admire Jeff. I would never have merged Whole Foods in with Amazon if I didn't greatly love and admire Amazon. I think it's more about the kind of corporations that you have out there. Google is an amazing company as well. We have an executive on had an executive on the Whole Foods board, and I remember when Amazon and Whole Foods were sort of courting each other and falling in love. I talked to that executive and said, "It's not too late for Google to get in on this game," but they weren't. She wasn't interested.
How long was the process between? I don't know what was reported, and I don't want to go beyond what you're comfortable with. But how long was the process of consideration of getting to know each other between the first conversation and the actual merger?
So I will tell you this story because I have told this story. Again, nobody believes it, but it's really what happened. So we were actually set up on a blind date. We were. I had met Jeff Bezos a year before. I really liked him, really admired him, brilliant guy. And I had read that Amazon at one point had considered possibly making an approach to Whole Foods, but nothing ever came of it. And then when we had shareholder activists that were trying to take over our company, that's another story, we don't have time to talk about it. I'm one of the guys that has done some consulting with Whole Foods. I talked to them and asked them, "Do you have a contact at Amazon?" And they said, "Yes, we do." It turned out Jay Carney, who was President Obama's head of communications, is now the head of communications for Amazon. And Matt was Jay's college roommate. So they made an inquiry and turned out, yes, they'd love to get together. So I flew down to Seattle with 3 executives. We met with Jeff and 3 of his top senior executives. And it literally was it was love at first sight. Those of you that have been in love or in love know that there's a conversation that occurs at some point. You might stay up all night and talk all night long. And then there's this connection. And we had that the very first time we met. And then 4 days later, they sent a whole team of executives down. Oh, and when the Whole Foods Market executives retreated after that talk, we were in a restaurant and we said, God, those guys are amazing. They're so brilliant. They're so intelligent. They're so authentic. And yeah, do you think they liked us too?
Just like a first date.
Yes, exactly. And it turned out that they did. And then we had a whirlwind romance. And 6 weeks after that first meeting, we were engaged. We were. But they were not allowed to consummate the marriage for 2 months.
The FTC got in your way? Like the parents were the...
The parents wouldn't let us. The
Yeah.
tribal elders wouldn't let us. We couldn't be alone together.
Tribal elders. There's so many
We've
analogies
only been
here.
married 7 weeks now.
Yeah.
And people want to know how we're going to change the world, but we're still in the honeymoon, so I'm not going
We're
to say.
7 weeks in right now.
Yeah, 7 weeks in.
We will stop the analogies on that relationship. I won't.
These are better than we're going to kill them.
Right.
Or this is survival of the fittest. It's a war out there. It's a jungle. Only the paranoid survive. I submit these type of metaphors are better.
You have demonstrated definitive and exemplary leadership around culture within capitalism. What can you say about your thoughts going forward about the culture you've created at Whole Foods Market?
We do have a very special culture, and it's what I call a very conscious culture. We have a higher purpose. We have core values. We have a culture that's very empowering, very team-oriented. So I get asked the question, what's going to happen now with the merger? And this is a conscious merger. So we are in dialogue about what can't change at Whole Foods. What is the essence of who we are? Again, in a good marriage, there's a me, there's a you, and there's a we. And all have to be taken care of. So we are consciously making sure that we get the time to discuss and work through what stays the same and what changes. I'm
not sure in a admirable way I've ever heard conscious merger as a term.
I know, I just made it up.
I like it a lot. Given the purity and the soulfulness of the way that you look at your life and this merger and your world, what briefly can you tell us about the shareholder battle, which I would propose is everything but conscious? It's purely about...
That's the sickest part of capitalism, is the financial sector, because it doesn't tend to have higher values besides just making money. That the last domino to fall by conscious capitalism will be that sector.
And that was your experience around. Was there any soulfulness in that shareholder?
No, not with those activists. They just wanted to take over the company, and they ended up making $300 million and chalking up a notch on their belt.
But it didn't contribute to efficiency, culture, excellence, anything.
If we had more time, I could tell you stories.
Tell us one story, one quick story.
When I met with those guys at Jana Partners, they came to Austin, and here's what they did. They came in our conference room, and they made us watch this 30-minute PowerPoint presentation that basically just trashed our company and said what a terrible job we were doing. And when I kept asking, I don't think that's accurate, or I'd like to see this PowerPoint. They said, we're not going to leave the PowerPoint with you. You can't have the PowerPoint. So, okay, well, I don't think everything you're saying is true. Then they said, look, we had 12 members on our board of directors, and they said, we want you to replace 7 of those directors, and we want to have veto rights on who the 7 are.
And you said, why?
And then they said, and by the way, we also want you to put the company up for sale. This was on a Wednesday, and they said, you have until next Monday to comply with our demands.
And you've been building the company for how long? How many years? Let's think. This is 2006.
39.
Okay. So they walk in, they know more than you do about your own company.
And then I said, well, okay, well, what if we don't? And they said, you'll find out, and you're not going to like it. And then they got up and left. So.
Okay, so.
That's the story. That's a true story.
Let's contrast that story with who you are as a person. So here's who you are as a person. At some point, I think not too long ago, you gave a significant amount of your stock in your company to charity, and you reduced your salary to $1. What does that say about, how do you think about money? What role does money have in the journey?
I mean, you need the money that you need, and there's not a right answer for each person. I mean, there's an old story about, I think it was the author of Catch-22 and Kurt Vonnegut, and they were being hosted by some billionaire someplace. And I think it was Vonnegut said to Heller, he said, look at what this guy makes more money every hour than you make in a year. How do you feel about that? And Heller thought about it for a second. He said, I have one thing he'll never have. I said, what's that? He says, I have enough. I have enough. I don't know how much that is for other people. I know I have enough. I don't worry about money. And so now money's a tool that I can use to make the world a better place.
If there was a moment, I'd love to hear it, but if there wasn't a moment of a story-packed moment when you had that realization, tell us how you came. There was a moment that you made a decision to go to $1 and to give what you had earned. And what led to that moment? What values could you share with us?
I mean, I think when I made that decision to start taking only read books I was interested in reading, I said that changed my life. It changed my life because from that point onward, I was dedicated to following my own heart, following my own purpose. So when you ask me those questions, the answer is I just knew. I just knew that it was the right thing for me not to take any more money from Whole Foods Market, and I haven't taken any money for 11 years. So it was just the right thing for me to do. I knew it inside my own being, and that's all I can point to.
The way I say it is, it's about listening to your gut, and this world, I look at the title of this current session, A World With or Without. Our world has so much with. There's so much noise. There's so much stimulation that it's hard to even hear or feel your gut.
Well, then you need to turn off some social media and tune into your own being.
Yeah. I mean, we're similar philosophically, and I guess I'm just proposing how unique, sadly, or maybe...
I don't know if it's unique or not. It's just who I am.
Yeah. When someone comes to you and they say, I want to go into business, say they're in high school or college, what should I read? What should I learn? Where should I go to school? What should I do? What do you say to them?
I mean, generally, entrepreneurs are generally on fire about something. They're passionate about something. And then they just go out and make it happen. It's sort of like I did. But also, I think that's the same story that most entrepreneurs have. You just get excited about something, and you're just following that passion, and it leads you into creating a business. If you're trying to... I'm not saying you can't try to figure it out and then start a business by doing market studies, but I don't find them to be generally, they don't make a big a difference. Almost all the entrepreneurs that have changed the world, the Steve Jobs and the Jeff Bezoses, the Michael Dells, the Bill Gates, the Mark Zuckerbergs, these, they got excited about something and they just went out and made it happen. So that's kind of my advice I'd give to an entrepreneur or a young entrepreneur.
And then what do you...
Stop wasting time and start doing. Entrepreneurs are doers. Do it.
And tell us about a mistake or a failure or a hiccup along the way. We all have our, it's not easy and it's not without pain. What would you share with us about the one hard story along the way for you?
So first of all, I'm gonna say that if I could go back in my own life, would I make any changes or would I do anything differently? And the answer is, yeah, probably. However, all the mistakes that I made taught me valuable lessons. And if I hadn't made those mistakes, I might not have learned the lessons. So the person I am today is partly the result of all the bad choices I made in the past. So in a sense, I needed to make those bad choices so I could learn the lessons, so I could become the person that I am today. So... But I don't want to cop out on that, but I will tell you, the worst decisions that I've made in business, without a doubt, were always people decisions.
Meaning?
Meaning promoting the wrong person, keeping somebody that was clearly not being successful and was unhappy, but hoping they would rise up, and waiting too long to make those decisions. You're no better than the team that you surround yourself with, so you should pick that team very carefully and thoughtfully.
So when we learn... Some learn about business with these metaphors that we'll go over by 3 or 4 minutes today, and I'll get you out of here. So some learn about metaphors, sports, war, things like this. And those are handy when you're in the midst of challenge and failure or the hurdles. Because you say, I'm going to fight on, I'm going to keep going. What do you say to yourself when your orientation is love or biology? What do you say to yourself in those moments? What are the metaphors?
For which moments? When
For the moments of challenge, of difficulty in the entrepreneurial journey.
those are the best metaphors when you're facing really challenge, because there's a tendency to go back into fear. When we're faced with incredible stress, we always have a choice. The choice is to go back and look for a safe place where we're not afraid. But there's another and better choice, and that is to use the energy that fear is creating to open your heart wider and use it as a springboard to take you higher. Make the second choice. Remember, life is short. We're going to die. Don't go back to the safe place. Go into the scary place. Launch yourself into it with an open heart, and you'll come out on the other side.
And this is the way you talk inside your company. This is the way you're talking to your senior leadership team and others.
If they ask me similar questions.
Maybe they need to all sit on stage with you like this. Okay, quick little lightning round. What's your favorite book?
No. I mean, books are a book is the favorite, but the book I read recently that I really like, which I push, is Phil Knight's Shoe Dog. Great story of a great entrepreneur.
What skill do you still need to learn at age? What age?
I want to learn foreign languages still. I'm still on my bucket list. I'll probably have to live to be 100, though, to get that one.
Other than Jeff Bezos, who's the most brilliant person you know?
My wife.
That's good. What's the worst idea you've ever had?
She's more brilliant than Jeff Bezos, for the record.
There you go. Well said. What's the worst idea that you've ever put into action that just blew up on you?
The worst idea? Sorry, I failed in this lightning round. There's plenty of bad ones, though.
What's the most unlikely source of inspiration that you've ever had?
I'm sorry. You can get inspiration from anybody you meet if you just are open to that experience and you don't come in with a preconception of who that person is. So sometimes I get the greatest inspiration from people I never expect to get any inspiration from, but you have that authentic moment. We were just talking to somebody you just met, and you have this connection and encounter, totally unexpected, because you just showed up in an authentic, vulnerable way. That happens to me all the time.
Well, it's happening to me now. So I want to thank you for giving us the gift of your wisdom and your soul and your perspective, not just on business, but on life. So,
thanks, Brad.
John, Mackey, thank you so much.